Welcome back to Breaking Silence here on Asia One. I'm Craig Vermay. Japan has long been regarded as one of Asia's most stable democracies, a country where the rule of law, democratic institutions and civil order have helped shape its global reputation. But a newly passed law criminalising the desecration of the national flag has sparked an intense debate over where patriotism ends and freedom of expression begins. The legislation makes it a criminal offence to publicly damage, remove or deface Japan's national flag in ways deemed likely to cause significant offence, with penalties including up to 2 years in prison or substantial fines. Supporters argue the law simply protects an important national symbol and brings Japan into line with existing protections for foreign flags. Critics, however, believe it represents something much more troubling. Human rights organisations, constitutional scholars and freedom of expression advocates warn that the law could have a chilling effect on peaceful protest, artistic expression and political criticism, creating uncertainty over what forms of public dissent may now be carried criminal consequences. The concern goes far beyond the flag itself. Throughout history, symbolic acts such as burning a flag, displaying damaged national symbols or using provocative imagery have often been forms of political protest rather than acts of violence. Human Rights Watch argues that international human rights law protects symbolic expression even when it is offensive, warning that governments should not criminalise speech simply because it offends patriotic feelings. Legal experts in Japan have also questioned whether the legislation is compatible with constitutional protections for freedom of expression, arguing that the wording is broad enough to leave citizens unsure of where legitimate process ends and criminal behaviour begins. For many Japanese, the debate is also deeply emotional. The national flag carries a very different meaning for many people depending on their history and personal experience. For some, it represents national unity, sacrifice and pride. For others, particularly in the light of Japan's wartime history, it represents a symbol connected to martyrism and unresolved historical memories. That history marks attempts to legislate respect for national symbols, especially sensitive. Critics fear that protecting a symbol through criminal law risks weakening one of democracy's most important freedoms, the right to peacefully challenge those in power. The debate unfolding in Japan reflects a wider global question. Across many democracies, governments are introducing new laws that supporters say strengthens national identity and social cohesion, while critics argue they narrow the space for dissent. The challenge facing Japan is not simply whether its flag deserves respect, it is whether protecting a national symbol should come at the cost of limiting one of democracy's most fundamental rights, the freedom to express unpopular opinion without the fear of prosecution. The new law was passed by Japan's parliament despite sustained criticism from human rights organisations, constitutional lawyers and more than 100 legal scholars. Human Rights Watch has called for the legislation to be repealed, arguing that it violates Japan's obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which protects freedom of expression, including symbolic forms of protest.
The organisation argues that causing offence alone is not sufficient justification for criminal penalties under international human rights law. Government ministers insist the legislation is aimed at protecting the dignity of the nation rather than silencing criticism. They argue Japan already criminalises the desecration of foreign flags and that extending similar protection to its own national flag corrects a legal inconsistency. However, opponents say the comparison is flawed because laws protecting foreign flags are intended to avoid diplomatic disputes, while criminalising criticism of a country's own symbols directly affects domestic political expression. Many legal experts remain concerned that the law's language is subjective, relying on what may cause significant discomfort or disgust to others. They warn that uncertainty alone may discourage artists, campaigners and protesters from expressing controversial opinions, even where those opinions would ordinarily be protected in a democratic society.
Every democracy must decide how it protects both its national identity and the rights of its citizens. Japan's new flag law has become about far more than a piece of cloth. It has become a test of how far governments should go in defending national symbols when those same symbols become part of a political protest. Human rights groups argue that freedom of expression is measured not by speech everyone agrees with, but by speech that challenges, provokes, and even offends. Supporters believe respect for national symbols strengthens society. Critics fear that criminalising symbolic protest risks weakening democracy itself. As Japan moves forward with the new law, the world will be watching closely to see whether it protects national pride without diminishing one of the freedoms that democratic societies are built upon. It's more than 4 years since Russia launched its attacks on Ukraine. The war has become one of relentless attrition, measured not by dramatic shifts on a battlefield, but by the staggering human cost.